Hey, music lover. Welcome to Matt and Cheryl's GenExcellent playlist. This is our inaugural episode. I'm Matt,
I'm Sheryl.
and we are two huge, obsessive music fans. We're going to be talking about everything under the musical universe here during this podcast and future episodes. One thing we will consistently be doing is looking at the music of our generation. That would be Generation X. Cheryl and I are both 50 somethings. We've worked in the music entertainment industry most of our adult lives. I'm a sportscaster. I do radio and television play by play for a minor league baseball team and Division One football and basketball team. But Sheryl and I met years ago when we both worked in music retail.
Yes, at Silver Platters, which my husband and I now own. It's a chain of record stores in the Seattle area, and we are still going strong after all these years. Been open since '85, I think, and Matt and I worked there in the early '90s
Right.
together.
So when Cheryl and I worked at Silver Platters, it was a CD only store. No records,
Hence
no
the
tapes.
name Silver
Yes,
Platters.
exactly. So back then, it was revolutionary new technology. You could listen to your favorite music without all the annoying pops and clicks of a record. You didn't have to turn the record over. You were essentially hearing the master tape as they heard it in the studio. Well, that didn't turn out to be necessarily 100% true, nor did the claims that CDs were indestructible
Indestructible.
turn out to be true. In fact, that was a complete
True.
joke because they're maybe not as easily damaged as records, but certainly if you scratch them the right way, they will be ruined.
Yes,
But I
yes.
remember people would like, oh, you could spread peanut butter on it. You could throw it around like a frisbee. No,
Right.
you handle it carefully by its edges and you place it carefully back in its case when you're done with it and close the jewel. Anyway, but yeah,
Yeah.
so Silver Platters back then was kind of upscale clientele. Not everybody had CD players at the turn of the '90s when we started working there. I got my first CD player in 1987.
Mhm. I got
Toward
mine
the end
in
of
'86.
Yep. Your first disc was what?
Well, I got a CD player for my birthday, and I know the Who Tommy. I remember.
I got Who's Next first. That was my first. That was one of my first discs.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's the one that stands out in my mind the most.
Would have been Dark Side of the Moon. That would have been the first one for me, and
Yes,
it seemed like an obvious choice at the
that's
time.
true. Yeah, Dark
uh,
Side of the Moon was definitely in my initial collection too. Yeah.
yeah, still very much learning and obsessing about Pink Floyd as a teenager at that point. That seemed like the perfect place to start. But
Yeah.
I don't know what my second one is, but I could say that the earliest CDs would have been that. Who's Next? Creedence Clearwater Revival, Green River was one of the first
Mm.
ones. And
Mhm.
the Doors' self-titled first album was one of the first ones. I'm trying to think of what the first contemporary album that I bought on CD was. I'm not really certain on that. It might have been the Sugar Cubes' first album, actually.
I could see that for you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So CD players were still new, emerging technology at that time, and like I said, not everybody had them yet. A lot of people were still listening to music on cassettes and records. So we serve as kind of an upscale clientele. We saw a lot of famous people come through the store. They had multiple stores. We worked at the Linwood one, but the original one was Bellevue.
Well, it was actually Northgate at the time. We were working at the
I
Northgate
said yes,
store.
Northgate. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
misspoke.
which is now
Um,
shut down and moved
it
up
has
to Linwood.
migrated to Linwood, and
Exactly. Yes.
we're going to talk about music that's we're currently obsessing on, and I've just visited your lovely Linwood store less than a week ago. Cheryl
Mhm.
picked up an album by a band called Clear Light, something that's been on my radar for years, and finally I'd seen it in there before, but it was priced a lot higher. I think it was
Hmm.
there's been 2 CD issues of this Clear Light album from 1967. One's on Collector's Choice Music early 2000s, and another one British import with some bonus tracks. I'm guessing that was the one that was in the racks when I was in there before. I didn't want to pay $20 for it.
Probably. Yeah.
I saw the Clear Light disc this time when I was in there. It was $8.99, so I snapped it up, and I've been obsessing on that one lately. Clear Light, one album, and one album only. They were produced by Paul Rothchild. It was on Elektra Records. I think they were the third rock band signed to Elektra Records after Love and the Doors, two just great, great rock bands of the 60s. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and their music is certainly reminiscent of those two groups. It gets heavier and it has a lot more progressive rock elements. And, I became aware of the album a long time ago because of being a big Doors and Love fan. I was curious about what more music might be in that vein that I would enjoy. And I saw that they were on the same label, produced by the same guy. This band never took off, didn't sell in great numbers. They didn't have any big hits on the radio. They were considered to be a great live band. And you could certainly hear that listening. I mean, great players. It's a good sounding record, well played, well produced. And there are a lot of elements in that got me to thinking why this album isn't held in higher regard at this point. It seemed to be on the leading edge of, I mean, as far as heavy music is concerned, there's some very heavy moments on that record, very heavy for 67, certainly. Progressive rock elements. There's debate about what the first progressive rock album was. A lot of people would say In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson is where it really started. But you've got a lot of stuff that came before that where music got more complex, more ornate, more Baroque, changes in time signatures, key changes, tricky instrumental passages. Elements of that were visible in music a couple of years before King Crimson. This Clear Light record, very strong prog feel. And I'm just wondering, just in my online research, why I don't see that record cited as a landmark album in terms of progressive rock and heavy music, because I think it hits those marks. One song in particular just blows me away, and a lot of people look at it as being kind of dated now. There's two tracks on the album that are very theatric qualities, and a lot of people would compare them to the Doors, like the end, their big
Mm-hmm.
show closing set and album closing set piece. And then the Doors also covered Brecht Weil song, Alabama song, that first album, so out of musical theater. Well, there's two tracks on this Clear Light album that to me have a strong theatric bent to them. And they're both covers. The band didn't write them. One is called Street Singer. It's the third track of the album. And then they're probably their best known song. And again, this is very much a cult act that didn't sell much at the time. It's called Mr. Blue, which was a folk song written by Tom Paxton, who's kind of he shared stages with all the folk greats and would have been known and respected, but never really had the cachet of the Bob Dylans, the top tier folk
Yeah.
folk singers, folk artists. But it's a song that's about conformity, basically, and paranoia. And it is very, very theatrical. And it's just the coolest arrangement. It starts with these drums, and just and long spoken word passages. And then it kind of gets into these rave up sections in the chorus. And each time it hits that rave up chorus, it's heavier and stronger than the time before. Then when it goes back to the verse and the spoken word, the music backing just gets creepier and heavier. And by the end of the song, it is this thundering heavy track. And I love it. I bought in 100%. Absolutely love it. I'm still getting through this disc. I've only really listened through to the end once last night. I haven't listened start to finish without distraction. This is a record more people should know about. Let's just say that.
I listened to it. The one song that I think it's called Sand. Does that
Yeah,
sound
the
right?
second track. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I really liked that song. And I think the Mr. Blue with the spoken word and, Jim Morrison is one of those characters and people that can get away with that kind of I don't know, I guess it comes across as being pretentious maybe in other
Right.
ways.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it was harder for me to kind of latch on to that Mr. Blue concept. I'll have to go back and listen to it a little bit more, closely and like let my preconceived ideas of what I'm hearing go and just take it for what it is.
So the Doors kind of patented that in terms of rock music, kind of that theatrical
Yeah.
drama.
Mm-hmm.
With the end, with when the music's over, 5 to 1,
Yeah.
songs like that. And a lot of bands tried doing that and failed spectacularly. The Guess Who is a good example. They did kind of their version of one of those Doors type,
Yeah.
dramatic, and it just
Poetic drama.
it was a joke. It was terrible. It's like what are you doing?
I
Guess
think
who's?
the
Yeah.
Moody Blues could do it.
Oh yeah. And in fact, they're probably. So the Doors album came out right at the beginning of '67, I think,
Hmm.
January '67, if I'm not mistaken. When did Days of Future Past get released? It was probably early in '67, but yeah, they were
Hmm.
definitely did the same, with the poetry and the spoken
Yeah.
word stuff on that album. Yeah, that's a good example. But the point I'm making is not a lot of bands did it well that tried to do that, and I
Yes.
I, I think Clear Light pulls it off. And part of the reason is I think their vocalist was an actor, and he's probably best known as an actor. His name was Cliff DeYoung. Acted in tons of TV and movies in the '60s and '70s.
Oh, okay.
Um, I'm not. I don't have a clear picture of him as an actor. I've probably seen him in a thing or two, and it didn't stand out. But I love his vocals on that record, and he does the drama very well. I mean, he really inhabits those songs.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a killer record. There's this killer playing on it, wild arrangement. The first song. Now you mentioned Sand. The song before that, Black
Yeah.
Roses. Black Roses very much out of the folk rock vein, but it kind of takes it to a heavier level than a lot of folk rock sounding with the jangly guitars. But
Hmm.
that song has so many twists and turns, and it gets real heavy during a guitar solo, and toward the finish of the song, it kind of builds and builds and builds. You know what else I thought of? 10cc a little bit
Oh, yeah.
in
Yeah.
the way the melodies take these twists and don't go where you expect them to go and resolve themselves. It's a lot like
Hmm.
the Godley and Cream songs on the early 10cc albums, where they're just the songs are going all over the place when you're expecting a more traditional form of
Yeah.
song, verse chorus, middle eight. Well, the verses just take all these twists and turns that you don't expect, and that's kind of the feeling I got with Clear Light too. Now I think, and that's why they were criticized a little bit, because you couldn't really latch onto the melodies because they were just so meandering, you know.
Yeah. I could see
Um,
that.
but with several listens, you could hear themes repeating. There's a country rock style song on there too that's incredible. It's kind of
Mm.
buried under a lot of effects and reverb, but you can hear the country picking guitar and the steel guitar there in the
Hmm.
background. And this is before Flying Burrito Brothers and Graham Parsons, and all that.
Yeah.
So this is very leading edge in that regard too. This is before the Byrds' "Sweetheart of the Rodeo" album came out. There's
Yeah.
this strong country influence in there on a couple of tracks. So no, I'm glad I picked that up. I'm glad I finally got around to listening to it. 20, 25 years after the fact when it first caught my attention, and I'm sure I'm going to be listening it to a few more times before.
The
Uh,
only I recognized Dallas Taylor on
yes,
that as the drummer because he later became the drummer for Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and you see his name on the album cover of
right.
Deja
Dallas,
Vu.
the Deja Vu Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young album.
Yeah.
Dallas Taylor and Greg Reeves, the bassist or the drummer and bassist, got credit. But what kind of set Clear Light apart at the time was they had two drummers. Now, Allman Brothers Band would kind of perfect that as far as the two drummer lineup, but Clear Light had Dallas Taylor and another guy named Michael Ney or Nye, N-E-Y, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Dallas Taylor obviously went on to play drums on some big albums. So you mentioned he played on Stephen Stills records and Manassas. And Michael Nye, the other guy, if you look at the album cover, he's got super long hair. Now remember, this album came out fall of '67.
Yeah.
So this is still pretty early on in those hippie days when
Right.
guys didn't have that shoulder length or hair down the back. That was pretty rare. You were
Yeah.
real
Yeah.
you were real freaky if you had hair that long. And he had to have some of the
Right.
longest hair on the scene at that time. So the thing that sets them apart, their kind of shtick, was having these two drummers. But when you listen to the album, and I've listened to it on headphones exclusively so far, it's a good stereo mix. And I think often one drummer's playing in the left channel, one in the right. They're kind of playing the same thing for the most part.
Yeah.
And the impression I get listening to the record is like, okay, yeah, I guess it gave him a little more power, but was it really necessary? I mean, you don't think about hearing two drummers on it.
Yeah.
I think one good drummer could have easily been fine,
Right.
and
There's nothing that
yeah,
complicated going on, and it doesn't
right.
seem like it lends itself to needing an extra. drummer.
Not like Moby Grape with the three guitars that just weave together and just these incredible. Moby Grape is another. It was gonna be the band. I could take two
Yes.
episodes and just go on and on about Moby Grape. So I'm
Yes, you
saving that
could.
for later. But
Right.
where the three guitars, yeah, you see where they're each doing their own thing and weaving together beautifully. Here, the two drums, it just doesn't seem
They're
like that
not
was really. Yeah,
distinct. Yeah, there
no,
isn't like a
no,
distinct sound or
yeah.
style between the two drummers. Yeah.
But anyway, that's what I've been banging on these past few days. What's been spinning around your way, Sheryl?
I tend to go down these rabbit holes. I go on to the All Music Guide, which started out in book form. It was a record guide that encompassed all genres. And now there's an online version. It's just a collection of, reviews, but they have a feature on their similar albums. So if you are looking at one album, you can click on similar albums. It'll bring up things that other albums that are similar. And I tend to go down a rabbit hole with that for hours, and I find all these things that I've never heard of or that are obscure to me anyway. And doing that, I can't even remember what album I started with. I discovered the Gene Clark album No Other.
Oh, yes. There we
which
go.
I'm sure that Matt is going to know a lot more about Gene Clark than I am, just because
I read the book. This guy Johnny Rogan, who is a biographer of the Byrds, wrote this huge. It's considered one of the great rock biographies ever, called Timeless Flight. He's revised it a couple of times. His latest revision, Requiem for the Timeless, Volume 2, he looks at all the deceased members of the band, the Byrds, and gives them their own long chapters. So all the Byrds, everybody who's ever played with the Byrds but is no longer living. Gene Clark is the first chapter.
Yeah.
So I've read the Gene Clark chapter. That's it so far. But this book is like 1,200 pages. It's ridiculous.
Well, there's so many members of the Byrds that went on to do a lot. There is a big story in there with every band member.
Well, they're an amazing, great, groundbreaking band that still hasn't come close to getting its due. But anyway, No Other. I must admit that's an album that critics have kind of rediscovered in the last, 10, 15 years. It's been reissued a couple of times. Now it's considered this cult classic, where at the time it was a folly, where it was this. It completely flopped in the marketplace. It was a huge budget record.
Huge budget, like $100,000. I think that they gave him this budget because, I mean, he had written some of the Byrds' most well-known songs, like "Feel a Whole Lot Better."
One of the greatest songs ever. Maybe the greatest pop song ever written. It's up there for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just discovered too, he wrote, along with Roger McGuinn and David Crosby, "You Showed Me," which the Turtles had a big hit with. And I guess the Byrds, the pre-Byrds, did do recordings of that song, or demo recordings.
The Beefeaters or the Jet Set, or the
Jet Set. Yeah. So anyway, I mean, he did have, credit behind him as far as a songwriter, but like you said, he hadn't really sold. He had albums before No Other, but they really hadn't sold, and he wasn't. But somehow they still decided to give him this huge budget, and I don't know if you've looked at the musicians that are playing on this album, Matt. You probably would recognize a lot of them because you know names and you know who people are, and I really don't. But
I'm guessing Jesse Ed Davis was on there.
Yes, he's one.
Another guy like Gene Clark, who had his substance issues and died young.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, he had assembled this great band and all these session musicians and players, and brought them together, and they recorded this album, which it has a very like country gospel feel that kind of permeates through the whole album, with these like women, female backup singers, and a very kind of soulful sense. And
all right, time out.
Yeah.
You said country gospel flavor permeates the whole album, and Sheryl like this album.
I know. That's
you like
so
this country gospel sounding album.
I don't normally like that. In fact, even the Byrds, I'm not a fan of. When the Graham Parsons stuff came about and they were more in the country fried vein, I just kind of stopped caring so much. It's not anything that I'm normally interested in. But
you never had the country. You never had the country epiphany that I did.
No, I have not had the country epiphany. I don't know. I feel like everybody else has. I feel like I don't know, I'm just missing out or not hearing what everyone else is hearing or something, but
I could tell you the exact moment I turned the corner on country music. The exact
okay.
moment. Driving cross country, I think I was going through Kansas, picked up some AM station in the distance, and they were playing, it was a classic country station. They played two songs back to back. One was I've Got a Tiger by the Tail by Buck Owens and his Buckaroos. And as a Beatles fan, Sheryl, you should appreciate Buck Owens and his Buckaroos.
Yeah.
They played that, and then they played 6 Days on the Road by Dave Dudley. I heard both these songs back to back. It was just like getting a combination punch in the face. Like, wow. I mean, and then it hit me. These classic country songs, a really good one, you hear it once and you know the song. They're so
Mm,
catchy, so
yeah.
incredibly catchy and tuneful. Ever since then, I've really had a strong appreciation for it. But I don't want to interrupt your story here, but you'll hit that epiphany hopefully sometime.
I don't know. I don't know. I understand why people like it like that, like and appreciate it. I just don't gravitate to it. To the sound. It's usually just the sound. It's not I mean, I have to tell you right now, I'm not a big lyrics person. Like I don't really pay attention to lyrics that much.
Lyrics are the last
I'm
thing.
much they're the last thing.
Yeah,
I mean, as
yeah,
long as they're not ridiculous and like just sound trite and
yeah.
just stupid and it's not distracting from the song, then I
See,
don't really
that's
care about the lyrics.
Oasis is a perfect example. Those first two records, the songs are so good. It doesn't matter what goofy crap he's singing, you know?
Yeah. That's what most music is
Yeah,
like for me, honestly. The stuff you're talking about in the country vein, it's very lyrical heavy and like it has that, it draws you into a
yep,
story or it
yep.
really, and I don't generally I'm not saying that I'm like completely immune to being affected by that, but it's not usually the first thing that grabs me in a song. It's
It's
usually
the
the
music that
music.
moves you. Yes.
It's the music that moves me. And that's why this Gene Clark album surprisingly did move me because it's much more moody. It reminds me more of like the band or Neil Young in that kind of a countrified
Uh-huh.
sound. Like his vocals are very similar to Neil's and Rick Danko.
Wonderful singer.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
he sounds very they have a similar kind of like style to their vocals. And the music, like the first song actually when you listen to it, especially like the first half, you'll be like, "Oh yeah, this totally is that country rock sound." And you're going to be wondering why I like it. But then the female voices come in. It just really changes the whole atmosphere. And
Are you not an Eagles fan?
I'm an Eagles fan, okay, yeah, but I'm not like I don't delve deep into their catalog or anything. But yeah, I like the Eagles.
Because the Eagles get crapped on by a lot of rock critics over the years, where guys look back and say, "Why were these guys so popular?" And then guys like Gene Clark didn't sell at all. They kind of
Oh
pioneered the
yeah.
sound. I think the Eagles are unfairly criticized. The songs
There's
are
so many
yeah,
songwriters in that band and they're all
yeah,
talented.
all
And no, I
talented
think so
vocalists.
too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, no, the Eagles are
No,
great.
and oh, so many talented vocalists in that. And
Yeah,
that I mean, that's really unusual to have a band that has several talented vocalist writers.
yeah.
I think that I mean maybe it's just because they're overplayed over people get tired of hearing Hotel California over and over again or whatever.
Well,
That might be part of it.
plus the fact that they sold a billion records and they weren't exactly humble about it either. I mean,
Yeah.
these were
Yeah.
kind of masculine guys. They weren't shriveling, sensitive artists. They were kind of alpha male types, and I think that turned people off too.
I feel like the only reason No Other wasn't as known is just because the record label just completely like ghosted him. Like they didn't give him any support, which seems weird to me because they spent so much money recording this album. Why wouldn't they want to promote it and actually try to sell the album? But I think there was some animosity there or something
Yeah,
that
if you read the Gene Clark story, you'll get an
yeah.
idea of how he
Okay.
alienated a lot of people just because of his personality and his behavior and his. I mean, he was a bad alcoholic and
He
drug addict
was.
for most of
Yes.
his life, and very unreliable on stage.
Mm.
Not a comfortable performer. Didn't really enjoy performing in
Yeah,
front of
didn't
an
he have
audience.
like
Yeah.
didn't he rejoin the Birds at one time and then he actually left like 3 weeks later or something because he was
Yeah.
like having
Right.
anxiety attacks
Right
or
after he
something like
quit
that?
the first time, and there's a TV
Yeah.
clip. There's a TV clip of them performing. God, I want to say it's a song off Notorious, and he's actually with them at that time for this TV appearance. Just during that
Mm-hmm.
brief period that he returned. Kind of a similar story with Peter Green and Fleetwood Mac, where he left the band and
Mm.
then came back to help them out on some dates, but wasn't back for a very long time.
Yeah.
There's another guy in band that I'm sure we'll bring up in this segment down the road.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not in a current obsession period with Fleetwood,
Fleetwood Mac.
but there definitely was a time a few
You
months back
have
when I
been. I
was.
remember that
Yeah.
not too long ago. Yes. Yeah. At any rate, I think that the reason that this album maybe didn't, like I said, didn't get so much promotion at the time and wasn't really the hit it should have been was because it just kind of faded away into the cutout bins, and then it wasn't revived again until I think it was re-released in the early 90s on CD, and then it came out again in 2000. And then just like a couple years ago, there's a huge deluxe, super deluxe, massive box set that came out that has like an 80-page book with it. And now that people have actually had the chance to listen to it and discover it, they're understanding what's behind it. I mean, it just has it has like the pedal steel guitar. It's got the Hammond B. It's got the synths, like kind of weird. I guess he was really into Stevie Wonder Intervisions when he was recording this album. So it has like that synth sound and that kind of funky, cool groove to it. And that's what I think is so cool about it, because it's kind of unexpected. Like it'll just pop up and you're like, oh wow, I wasn't expecting that to be part of this album. But it runs through the whole album. And the song No Other is definitely like that's the one you really can hear the Stevie Wonder influence in. And it's a really sticky song. It gets stuck in my head, although I have no idea what the lyrics are except no other. That's it. But there's something about the melody and I don't know, it does remind me a lot more of like the band. Like it has the organ sound that's just kind of washing through the whole thing that kind of picks you up and lifts you up. And, it's really cool. I want you to listen to it.
Well, you have sold me on it. Not that you needed to. I was already sold on that record to begin with. A big, huge Birds fan here. And for those who don't know, Gene Clark was on their first 3 records of the Birds. He was the guy out front with the tambourine and the Prince Valiant haircut, kind of good looking,
Mm-hmm.
athletic looking guy. Was really their first great original songwriter in that group, and was actually made the other guys jealous because he's getting all his publishing money and driving around in a Porsche. Left the group because he couldn't deal with the travel and the stress, and then embarked on this winding solo career. Never sold any albums in his lifetime.
Yeah.
He was always very much a cold artist, bounced around label to label. But he's got this whole catalog that's worth searching out and discovering, because very talented singer, songwriter, and kind of a pioneer in that country rock
Yeah,
vein.
and
Yeah.
actually, I can see huge influences for the No Depression, the
Mm-hmm.
'90s No Depression bands like the Jayhawks, Uncle Tupelo, especially like Sunville, Uncle Tupelo, the Jay Farrar. He sounds a lot like him. Like his vocals are very similar. And yeah, I mean, I would imagine. I don't even know if any of those people had heard that album, but it seems like it would have been a big influence on them because it sounds so much like what that No Depression sound became.
So No Other came out in 74. You mentioned Stevie Wonder's Intervisions, which came out in 73. Stevie Wonder's Purple Patch, his emancipation from Motown, and his incredible, almost completely self-produced solo records, beginning with Talking Book. That run started in 72, which takes us back to the central conceit of our show, Matt and Sheryl's GenExcellent playlist. I'm Matt Rickard. She's Sheryl Bott. We are going to build a playlist for our generation that called X. We're both 50-somethings, graduated high school in the mid-late 80s. We're going to soundtrack our lives and those of our peers, and build this playlist. Once we get it together, to be something you could play at a get-together of Gen Xers or 50-somethings. We're going to start at the very beginning, and I chose 1972. We're talking about earliest musical memories here. Now, mine start earlier than most. I will have to admit. Growing up in a radio family, my dad was a small town radio program director. He was a musician himself, played folk guitar and harmonica. When we were kids, we'd have little hootenannies in the bathtub, singing folk songs. my sister and I and my dad and mom. He had a pretty good sized record collection. He brought a lot of stuff home from the radio station. And I started having records when I was very young. And I didn't realize how young until I was chatting with my parents the other day. I knew I had a record player when I was in preschool. But it turns out I actually had this record player even before we moved to the house that we lived in most of my childhood. And we moved there when I was 3. Apparently, I had the record player when I was 2, claims my mother. Uh,
Wow. Your
and
own
had
record player?
my own record. It was her record. She had this, it was a white Magnavox suitcase record player from the early
Mhm.
60s. And it was hers. She gave it to me. I had my own records to play, not just kids' records, but, pop records my dad brought home from the station. They said the first one that I really played to death was Mule Skinner Blues by Dolly Parton, which probably is why I still have an affinity for country. But I really got
Mhm.
into like the soul stuff in the early 70s, particularly like the Philly soul sounds and the proto disco stuff that was coming out in 73, 74. That was the music I liked the best. Um, the first record that I can remember being my favorite was a Jackson 5 record called I Am Love, kind of on the later period Jackson 5. I think it came out in 74. There's a great performance clip of, I think they're on the Sonny and Cher show, or maybe it's Donnie Marie
Mhm.
doing that song. And there's like this, it's a long, it was like 2 sides of a 45. And there's this kind of psychedelic instrumental section. And there's the point in the breakdown where they all jump in the air. And it's like the slow motion kind of acid,
Oh, yeah. That
effect.
was a popular effect,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, and then I mean, it gets pretty funky and heavy in the instrumental. So I played that to death. But I also had these radio show records that my dad would bring home. They were sponsored by Today's Army. There were 2 different kinds. One was this garish red, white, and blue cover, kind of psychedelic artwork. And Robert W. Morgan was the host, well-known radio personality in L.A., KHJ Boss Radio in L.A. in the 60s and 70s. And then the other one, Billy Pearl was the host. I don't really know much about his background. The records were blue with like red stars on them, in my recollection. But they were amazing collections because it was a great cross section of popular music that went across genres. So you'd have pop, you'd have
Mm.
rock, you'd have R&B, soul, easy listening, jazz, like fusiony jazz stuff. It's all on all of these records. They're double records, so 4 sides of music. So I really started getting into the popular music of that era, like
Do
73,
you still have
74.
those records?
No, sadly, I don't.
Mm.
But I've found a couple of them like thrift shops. They're semi
Mhm.
collectible. They're semi
Mhm.
collectible. So
Yeah.
I've found a couple of the Robert W. Morgan. I want to collect as many as I can, just for nostalgia's sake, if nothing else.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's, I mean, to this day, I still have a soft spot for the pop of that era. Like the corny AM pop music of the mid 70s. A lot of
Yeah.
like Spiders and Snakes by Jim Stafford, stuff like that. It's just goofy hit songs. But the song we're going to focus on for the year 1972 that I think triumphs for the year, even though it wasn't released in 72, was released in late 71, but still dominated the charts through much of the year. It was one of the top selling singles of, I think, number 3 of that year, even though it was released the year before, is American Pie by Don McLean. Here's a song that still, to this day, everybody knows, just about everybody could sing along to, no matter how old you are. I mean, people our age make fun of the millennial generation, say, oh, they don't care about anything that didn't happen 5 minutes ago. Well, they do. I mean, there's certain musical acts that still go on and are still appreciated, and certain songs, and this is one of them. That the people still connect to this song. The artist Don McLean was an unknown when this album came out. It was his second record. He put out a folky guy with a solo acoustic guitar album on a tiny independent label called Tapestry in it was late 69 or early 70. It didn't sell tons. And then the label goes out of business. They get snapped up by a major. Next thing you know, his next record's coming out, United Artists, and he's got a little recording budget this time. He's still, it's a lot of solo, folk, singer songwriter, acoustic guitar type music, but a couple of band productions as well. American Pie, one of those. McLean, he's a New Yorker, came out of Westchester County, kind of Tony, Richie Richville, though he grew up fairly middle class. Kind of a loner, Wasn't an only child, but he had much older siblings, so he was essentially an only child. He was a sickly child with asthma. He had to get pulled out of school for long periods of time. And he decided at a young age that he wanted to be not just a musician, but a troubadour. He wanted to be the guy traveling around, singing his songs with a guitar to audiences all over the place and making his way around, experiencing life on the road and that whole thing. And he had a strong foundation underneath him. It's like, okay, this is what I want to do. So he went about figuring out how to do it. I gotta be able to sing. I gotta be able to play the guitar. So I'm going to practice guitar, get really good at that. I'm going to learn how to be a good singer. He did that. He started writing letters to Pete Seeger, who was a folk hero from New York. He was blackballed for a long period of time for communist sympathies. Uh, really an avatar in the folk world, ultra liberal guy. And he got taken under his wing by Pete Seeger. He'd play concerts with Pete. Pete would travel up and down the Hudson River on this boat in the 60s. At this time, environmental awareness was his big cause. And they were talking about the pollution in the river and you got to get it cleaned up. And they would do these concerts on this boat up and down the Hudson. So Don kind of came under his wing, kind of learned his craft a little bit, and then struck out on his own, recorded this one album. And as far as American Pie, he had this concept in mind where he wanted to write a song that talked about how the politics and the pop culture, the music of any age are intertwined. They're running parallel and reflect one another. And really, for me, the theme of the song is the loss of innocence, going from the late 50s to the late 60s. So the song came out in 71, probably written earlier in 71. Might have had the germ of the idea in 70. The chorus of the music coined a phrase, "the day the music died," and that line is in reference to the death of Buddy Holly in a plane crash, which happened in, I think, February 3rd of 59, Clear Lake, Iowa. Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, Richie Valens, all died when their charter plane crashed, trying to go from Clear Lake to Moorhead, Minnesota for the next show on this Midwest tour. Buddy Holly, obviously now we recognize him as this giant in the history of rock and roll, one of the pioneers of rock. He broke on the scene in 57, had a couple of big hits. That'll Be the Day was a massive hit. Peggy Sue, the follow-up big hit. By 59, the Crickets had broken up. Buddy Holly was spending a lot of his time in New York. He was trying to get into music publishing and producing. Bright guy, young guy, but really kind of ambitious. The Crickets were like, nah, we want to stay back in Lubbock. We want to be with our families. And he kind of disappeared from the charts a little bit. He wasn't like having big hits. It had been a while. And at that time, rock music was still relatively new and perceived as a passing fad by a lot of older people. Kind of similar to the way folks our age and older might have looked at hip hop when that started getting popular. Oh, it's a fad,
Yeah.
Here we are 40 years later. So when he died, Buddy Holly died, it wasn't like stop the presses news. I mean, it was in the papers, but it wasn't like, of course, they didn't have 24-hour news channels back then. So it wasn't like, all right, we stop everything now for breaking news. The rock and roll artist Buddy Holly has perished in a plane crash. We're going live, 24/7. No, nothing like that. It was just kind of an item in the newspaper, but it struck a chord deeply with the young Don McLean, who was a young teenager and just, becoming entranced by Elvis Presley and the early rock and rollers. And it was a very meaningful moment for him. And that kind of tracks the beginning of this period where you had Buddy Holly die, Elvis Presley goes to the Army, Jerry Lee Lewis has his controversies marrying his 12-year-old cousin. Little Richard gets into the ministry, leaves secular rock. So it's like all of a sudden, this vital, aggressive, new rock and roll music, it's kind of fizzing out. And then you have this lighter, more corporate, more family-friendly, poppy rock and roll coming out of the turn of the 60s, like Frankie Avalon and Fabian and that, Bobby V, that kind of stuff, watered down rock.
Yeah.
So the day the music died, it kind of signposts this change in rock. But then the song itself seems to reference a lot of political and musical signposts of the 60s. And there's debate forever about what individual lines and references mean. but I think most people who know music can recognize some of the references. I mean, you hear certainly the Rolling Stones are referencing there, Bob Dylan,
Hmm. The
Janis
Birds,
Joplin, the Byrds, the Altamont Festival.
Lennon, the
Uh,
Beatles,
Lennon read a book on Marx, right? The Beatles,
Marx,
Sergeant Pepper's
Sergeant
album in
Pepper's.
particular for the Beatles. Um, Don's been evasive over the years in not, specifically saying this means that, this means this. And in fact, recently he's come out and said, no, the jester isn't Bob Dylan, which I'm not buying for a second.
No.
The jester on the sidelines in a cast.
Yeah.
That's
And what
that's
else would that be?
that's Bob Dylan in 1967 after he had a motorcycle accident and squirreled himself away in upstate New York. Wasn't really a part of much that was going on in that summer of love because he was recuperating physically
Hmm.
and mentally too. There's been theories about, how seriously hurt was he? Was this all just a scheme so he could
Hmm.
drop out for a while? And, because he was on this crazy path and gobbling amphetamines and probably headed for a crash, metaphorically, if not physically. But, at the heart of it, I think it's just talking about how they've gone from these innocent days of the 50s where America was prosperous post World War II. There's a lot of references to the church. What's the line? If the Bible tells you so, at the beginning, it's
Hmm.
because, more
Yep.
people their lives were more dictated by the church and religion. Whereas at the end of the decade, that had decreased dramatically, where pop culture starts to take over as a dominant force, for good or
Yeah.
for bad. And I think from Don McLean's perspective in the song, it seems like he's saying it's not really for good. We've gone from these innocent, happy days, early rock, to now things getting druggier and more violent, protests in the
Hmm.
streets. I think, there's a reference to the marching band refused to yield. What does that mean? Is it Kent State, where the
Mm.
four students were shot down by the National Guard in 1970? Is it the Chicago Democratic Convention where protesters clashed with police outside the convention facility? Or is it the dominance of the Beatles' Sergeant Pepper refusing to yield its place on the charts?
Hmm.
Sergeant Pepper's, marching band. Um,
Yeah.
could be any of those. Could read it in a number of ways, or all of them, and it makes for a more interesting song. I think to leave that up to debate. I almost see that as a pro church. But we need to get back to simpler times and being more religious and more family oriented. Um, I don't know that that's where he's coming from, but you could certainly be read that way. And I think by leaving it vague, and
Hmm.
and having all these countercultural references in it, you could really take whatever you want out of the song. And it's part of why it appealed to a broad cross section of people and became one of the biggest hits in pop music history, dominated the charts.
Yeah, I think it's just has this sort of journalistic narrative viewpoint. He's just kind of as an outsider looking in, and I mean I didn't become familiar with the song until much later. It wasn't until the 80s when I first became aware of it. I guess I was sort of more looking at the pieces of the song that made sense to me. It's almost like a little history lesson, but I think that one of the main reasons why it has had such longevity too is because the chorus is so singable,
Right. Yes.
and another one of those sticky songs that, it just everybody can sing along with it and knows it, and it's fun to sing. The whole song is really fun to sing, actually. Just the way it just bounces along and
I could probably
um
sing the whole song right here, right now, get
yeah,
every lyric. And it's a 7.5 minute song. That's a
I
lot of
know.
lyrics.
It's
But
kind
but
of amazing, actually. I
oh
could do that too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Not that
Which
we're gonna
says a
torture you with it, but
No, 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 no. I wouldn't do that. I could do it. I'm not going to, but
you mentioned the
but
chorus,
I
the sing along chorus that everybody knows, even
yeah.
those with only just a passing familiarity of the song can sing along to the chorus. And you got to we'll talk about the musical structure of the song, but the end of the song, it basically just sounds like dudes in a bar singing along to the chorus, not really
Yep.
harmonizing. You can hear Don
Yeah.
in there. I don't know if it's just the musicians on the record, who aren't really professional singers, but I think it's a clever conceit to end the song that way because it's a song that would be destined to be sung along to in bars by everybody, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I didn't really know I wasn't really that conscious of that until you brought that up, but it's like, "Oh yeah, it does have that at the end." It's like everybody's singing along, clinking their glasses together, feeling and
But
concept.
there's certainly more to a hit song than just a great lyric or an idea and a catchy chorus. So it's a well produced, well played song. experienced studio musicians on it from the East Coast. So Don's playing the acoustic guitar. He's a wonderful singer, by the way. Don McLean, beautiful
Mm-hmm.
voice, wonderful technical singer. Takes that aspect.
Yeah.
He's always said before, you call me a singer-songwriter. Before anything else, I'm a singer. Number one. And he's a very gifted singer, but he's no slouch on the acoustic. And then you've got, bass, drums, guitar, electric guitar, and the piano, which really, when you listen to this, the piano is the dominant instrument in that song. It's played by a guy named Paul Griffin, studio musician, who played on Bob Dylan's great trilogy of albums in the mid-'60s, Bringing It All Back Home, Highway 61, Blonde on Blonde, among other things. But, his piano makes that song musically for me. The long intro, which Don has said kind of harkens back to 20s and 30s pop music, where you'd have these long intro pieces that didn't necessarily have anything to do with the verses and the choruses. And the intro is very long in that song. Long time ago. And you got the beautiful piano underneath that, just setting up the song. And then the whole band kicks in after that. You have the strum and acoustic, the bass and the drums. Bass player is a guy named, I think he called himself Bob Rothstein, then goes by Rob Stoner now. He played with Dylan. He was on the Rolling Thunder tour. The guitarist, David Spinoza. The electric guitar comes in about 3 verses in, I think, and pretty tasty, laid back, not flashy. He played on 3 different Beatles solo albums, 3 different Beatles, which makes him, in a pretty special class, puts him in a special class. And then the piano, it's the beautiful piano at the beginning. And then once the main portion of the song kicks in with the verse, the chorus, that piano is still just going to town throughout the whole song. A lot of gospel, soul licks, and country licks too. Like the little country lick right before the band kicks in at the end of the intro, kind of like a little Floyd Kramer Slipknot thing. Beautiful little hook.
Yeah.
Great hook. And then he does something similar at the end too. In recent years, we've had these documentary movies come out about session musicians, like Standing in the Shadows of Motown, the movie about the Wrecking Crew, where these guys are finally getting their due and their appreciation. I've never heard anybody. This is one of the biggest hit songs ever, and a song that has endured through the decades. About time Paul Griffin got some laurels for this, because he nailed that piano part, and without it, I don't think the song is nearly what it is, musically at least.
Yeah. And it also, I think, kind of brings in that whole in the bar sing-along feel to it too. Like you can imagine, the piano.
The best bar sing-alongs have a piano behind them, don't they?
For sure.
Perfect. So Don writes this song. He's this nobody folk singer on a nothing label, and then next thing you know, he's this huge star. And something from his family background certainly paid off well at that point, because before he undertook this dream to become a musician, he went to college and got a business degree, and he was very prepared once success rolled around. He had no anticipation that this was coming, but he was ready for it, and he had complete ownership of that song, the masters, and he has made a fortune just from that one song. People ask him over the years, Don, what does American Pie mean? What's the meaning of that song? Well, his flip answer has been, it means I never have to work a day in my life, which is true.
It's true.
He's continued to do that, but he's Don is an interesting cat. He's kind of an iconoclast. He doesn't really fit in with a lot of musician peers. I've never once heard of him touring or playing with or even being cited by or cited with the top singer-songwriter. And this was the singer-songwriters were huge in this era. Huge, dominating music. But he wasn't really hanging with those people. He was kind of out on his own, kind of a loner. And part of that was, I just, what I think the theme of that song is about. He didn't fit comfortably into this counterculture, this drug culture in rock and roll. And a lot of his life, he's toured just by himself, because, that's kind of what he wanted. Just me and my guitar. I'm the troubadour. B, he keeps all the money.
True.
He doesn't have to pay.
He doesn't have to pay 2 drummers.
Right. Yeah, like Clear Light, I'd pay 2 drummers.
Yeah.
It's just him and a guitar. So he doesn't need all these trucks. He doesn't have to pay all these band members, roadies, all these people that go into producing a traveling rock and roll circus. It's just him and a
Yeah.
guitar. There's nothing to it. So, I
Well,
mean,
and actually
yeah,
the other songs from that album are just him and the guitar and his
for the most
guitar. I
part,
mean,
yeah.
there's only one other song on that album that even has a full band. The rest of it is just an acoustic guitar or piano.
And then one
Um,
other song caught my attention last night. I tried
yeah.
listening. I tried listening to the album
Yeah.
again. I got a little further this time before I drifted off. It keeps putting.
Okay.
I've tried listening to that album like 4 or 5 times. I fall asleep. I listen at night and I fall asleep, which isn't
It's
a
very
Yeah, it's
relaxing.
not a criticism. It's not a criticism. It's yeah, it puts me in a good place. But
Yeah.
that song you're talking about, the full band.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that he revisits that song when he plays live now, because you think of the theme about, have I offended you with something I said? I mean, it seems like
It's
really
very sarcastic and
fits the
yeah.
tenor of the times with the woke thing and the backlash with woke people. And
Everybody loves
yeah.
me, baby. Isn't that what it's called?
Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody loves me. Why
Loves
don't
me.
you?
Why
Yeah.
don't you?
But that's Don. Don, he hasn't
Yeah.
had to work another day in his life, but he has. But it's perfect. Here's a guy who knows what he wants, is very exacting about it. It's going to be this way or no way, and
Seems
he's been
very
able.
methodical
Yeah,
in his thinking and how he's gonna kind of crafted his
yeah,
career and his
bright,
yeah.
bright guy, organized mind, thoughtful guy,
Yeah.
but not to all tastes. Um,
Mhm.
uh, you probably don't want to read too much about his personal life. There's some ugly stuff out there that may or may not be blown out of proportion. It's neither here nor there for me. I separate the artist from the person.
Yeah.
I have no qualms about that. But yeah, so he's been able to do his career exactly, do it on his terms. So he doesn't have to
Yeah.
care about selling records, doesn't have to care about pleasing radio. He's just doing whatever the hell he wants to do, whenever he wants to do it.
He
More
set
power
himself
to
up
him.
for that,
Yeah,
with
yeah.
this, and the song became a huge, huge hit, which he probably, he couldn't have predicted, but he set himself up for that by owning all the songwriting credits and all, like he knew as a businessman what he needed to do to make sure if he was successful, that it would pay off for him. And it did. I hadn't really listened to the whole album before we started talking about, but I did go and listen to it. And I think like you said, it keeps making you fall asleep. It does have this very soothing quality to it. His voice, especially. I mean, his
Great
vocals, he
voice. Yeah.
has this lovely voice, but I mean, I know I said I don't really pay attention to lyrics, but these lyrics actually do stand out to me because they're so poetic. And so, I mean, not necessarily in the vein of American Pie. The other songs have a more personal feel to them. And yeah, I think the album as a whole it's a really good representation of that singer-songwriter of the era. And I think it's a great album. It's not like American Pie. The songs don't sound like American Pie, most of them, but he's talented for sure.
Oh, no question. No question. And he did have a few other hits. I mean, Vincent was also on that same record. A beautiful song. A lot of people might not recognize the title, but they would recognize the beginning of the song, Starry, Starry Night.
Starry Night.
It's about Vincent van Gogh. That was a pretty sizable hit off the same record. And he had a couple more hits in the 70s, nothing big. Then he kind of disappeared, fell off his label. And then kind of out of left field, he had another hit song at the turn of the 80s with a cover of Roy Orbison's Crying. That's kind of an interesting story behind that song, too. He was without an American record deal. He'd been on Arista. Clive Davis, who you mentioned, former Columbia Records mogul, had started Arista Records. Don was on it, didn't get along with Clive. They had a falling out. He's off the label. He doesn't have an American label. He records this album down in Nashville with top musicians and the Jordanaires singing behind him. 78, I think, is when he recorded the music. And then finally gets it released overseas, starts having hits in European countries, then a hit in the UK, and then finally gets a belated release. I can't remember the name of the label in the USA, but it hit top 10. Crying by Roy Orbison. Roy Orbison, one of the great vocalists in popular music, bar none.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Amazing voice, amazing singer. His songs are not for amateurs. You got to be pretty damn good to pull off a Roy Orbison song. See K.D. Lang, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Don nails it in one take with these great musicians. This very demanding song. It's got to get way up in there in the high register. Just shows what a top-class singer he is.
Yeah.
And that was a hit all over the world again for him in the early. And that was really the last time he troubled the charts. He's continued to release albums and tour over the years. But like I say, just doing what he wants to do on his own time, on his own terms. And
Mhm.
it's all about that publishing, kids. If you have
Yeah.
one hit record that you can hang your hat on, that can be a lifetime for you.
Yeah,
And,
actually that was one of with when we were talking about Gene Clark earlier, Feel a Whole Lot Better, when Tom Petty released Full Moon Fever and he recorded that song, that album, was a huge seller.
oh yeah,
Gene Clark made tons of money from that song. Unfortunately, he used it to dig himself deeper into alcohol and drugs, but uh just another example of that kind of, if you own the publishing, then you could be set for life.
yep. Gene Clark, one of many examples of artists that just weren't cut out for fame and the fame game. Just couldn't
Yeah.
handle it. Couldn't handle it personally. Couldn't control his worst urges and traits, and he's no longer with us as a result. But he definitely left
Yeah.
behind a great catalog of music, and a lot of that unexplored by the average music fan. And certainly, I look forward to over the next several years discovering more and more of his catalog, and certainly no other, which you've already gotten into. That's definitely high on the list for me. Well, we've talked about our early music memories, and our first song on our playlist, American Pie by Don McLean. That is going to lead us into our next show, 1973, in which we'll choose two songs from that year, both big hits. And one of those songs, in fact, very closely tied into Don McLean.
Don
He
McLean.
inspired this song, or at least the recording of a song that would be a big hit in 73. The other hit song definitely falls into the camp of the campy, the goofy
Yeah.
AM pop songs of that era that Sheryl and I both love. Although I don't think either of us hold a ton of love for this particular song, but we'll be talking about this artist and some of his other work in the song, in particular
Yeah.
when we cover 1973 in our
Yeah.
next episode. So the playlist
Mhm.
has begun. Number one on our track, number one at our Gen X party, American Pie by Don McLean. And we'll hope you'll join us for our next episode when we add two songs to that playlist and talk about other musical stuff that's on our minds. So until then, I'm Matt Rickard.
I'm Sheryl Bott.
And this is Matt and Sheryl's GenExcellent playlist. Take care, everybody.